Hi, my name is S.V. Babu. I'm in the Clarkson University now for almost 30 years. We have been working in the field of CMP for now about 15 years. And we have had extensive support from various companies, end users, slurry manufacturers, particle synthesis capabilities. We have extensive capabilities in this area. We have worked with many companies. We have leveraged CAMP's expertise in the area of colloids and surface science and thin film processing in this field of chemical mechanical planarization. We started off working with copper, skipping alumina, abrasives that were used mostly for polishing other films and oxides, and we skipped oxide films also, jumped into chemical mechanical polishing of copper using ferric nitride, if you believe it or not. And then we found that those are not really, well, let me put it this way, hydrogen peroxide is certainly more valuable and less corrosive. Tools will not be colored by iron contamination. So we moved on to hydrogen peroxide and started working with silica abrasives, both colloidal and fumed. And we did, I think, a lot of our work has been published. A lot of our students now who graduated are running the CMP operations at IBM, Intel, and Micron. And because, you know, we have been around so long that many of our students and my colleague students from CAMP and Clarkson are well known in this field and working with various companies. Some of the major discoveries that we made were the role of the hydroxyl radicals and the effect of the surface area of the silica particles in polishing the barrier, tantalum, for example. So we looked at the effect of these parameters on the polish rates and the defect formation structures, and then moved on to look at selectivity, moving to dielectrics. And then a lot of the early work we did with the dielectric polishing was focused on STI, looking at the selectivity between oxide and nitride. And our earlier work, going back to about 10, 12 years ago, showed that the amino acids, proline, was very effective in suppressing the nitride removal rate. And this was patented and became, I think, an accepted slurry by one of the large end users. And then we moved on to various other films, and more recently then we've been looking at controlling the selectivity of the oxide, nitride, and polysilicon. The polysilicon obviously plays a role now in a variety of structures, whether it is a MOSFET device, new MOSFET devices, FinFET transistors, or simply the high K metal structures, where there's a need now, in some cases a high polysilicon rate, in some other cases a low polysilicon rate. In MEMS devices there are actually very large topographic structures where very high polysilicon rates are required. So we have been focused on now, in the last few years, on controlling the selectivities of the oxide, nitride versus polysilicon. And I think we have obtained some extensive and very elegant results, where we just finished some results that will be published soon, showing that abrasive-free slurries using polymer solutions are very effective in getting a very high polysilicon rate and very low oxide nitride removal rates. We also, along the way, looked at various barrier polishing slurry combinations, tantalum, tantalum nitride, more recently ruthenium, and as well as germanium we have been focused on. And now we are moving also to 2,5, 2,6 materials like indium phosphide. My students have now been working as interns, several at Intel, several at IBM, and now recently at IMEC in Belgium. We also have extensive collaboration with the Japanese manufacturers. Ibara is a major partner for us, and then also with recently with the Chinese National Academy in Shanghai. So that's a good way, I think, to lead into any questions that Peter may have at this point.
What impact what challenges have the low-K dielectrics created in CMP?
Yeah, the low-K dielectrics also, I should have referred to earlier, pose certain challenging problems of their own. In particular, they're mechanically weak and very fragile, and they also have problems with adhering to copper and the barrier. So what we have done is to focus more on low pressure polishing, which means then the mechanical component is sacrificed and the chemical activity of the slurry has to be improved. So we did a lot of work with very highly reactive slurries, maintaining reactive abrasives also at the same time. One way we did that was combining what we call as composite, mixed abrasive slurries. These were very effective in polishing these barriers and particularly the barrier at a high rate and minimizing defects. The challenge with these composite slurries was to make sure that they remain coherent and cohesive and not fracture. So considerable work is going on now in taking advantage of that. We also looked actually at ceria particles and showed that the relationship between the cerium-3 and cerium-4 species is very important in controlling the oxide and the nitride removal rates. And the low-K films obviously are taken from modifications of the oxide. So whether it is a carbonated film or a psycho film or the old black diamond films, all these can also have similar affinity to, based on the silicon dioxide knowledge that we have, the ceria particles. So controlling the surface chemical reactivity and morphology of these silica particles was very important, and we showed that going back to the proline work, we extended that using amines, amino acids, and other additives. Clearly, the defects are very important, and to minimize those defects, one needs to increase the chemical reactivity. Chemical reactivity increase, of course, has a compensating effect in terms of corrosion, and so it's very important to look at passivating inhibitors. And we did quite a bit of work with the conventional BTA and some various surfactants also. Yes. So.
Have you looked at electrochemical mechanical polishing?
We did very little work on electrochemical mechanical polishing. By the time we got into it, I think various challenges became obvious, and so we didn't spend much effort in that area. Several of my colleagues here at Clarkson did some work in that, and they published several papers in that area. We did the electrochemical investigations of metal polishing, copper, tantalum, tantalum nitride, and my colleague Dip Roy, who is an expert in electrochemistry, and I did a lot of work in that area, and a lot of that is again in the published literature.
A lot of people are concerned about adding copper to the waste, and treating that waste. Have you looked at that? Is there any way to recycle that copper effectively or not?
The challenge there is the fact that the copper concentrations are very small. We are talking about maybe parts per million kind of concentrations. So recovery of that becomes expensive. But one of my colleagues, Yuzhou Lee, did quite a bit of work with a couple of other companies before. I have not done much work with that. People looked at recycling the slurries, but that also has certain problems because of contaminants. And we really have not been focused very much in that area.
Now you mentioned MEMS as another application outside of semiconductors. Have you looked at LEDs as another?
We are not focused as much on LEDs, but we are now trying to look at aluminum nitride and gallium nitride substrates. We are talking to a couple of companies now to develop combinations of slurries, and it's still an ongoing project for now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.